Welcome to Fridays with Father. I'm Father Kyle Rink, and I'm here at Our Lady of Lourdes because I want to talk about Mary today. It's the month of Mary. Here at Our Lady of Lourdes in front of our Pietà statues, beautifully, and it was just recently redone and brought down here to the in the sanctuary. And it was originally from the Academy Chapel up in downtown Vancouver. Now, Mary is an interesting part of our spiritualities and lives. Now, I'll tell you, growing up, I did not have a Marian devotion. We just wasn't part of our family. In fact, the first time I ever prayed a rosary was when I was, I think, later in high school, when my grandma passed away. That's the first time I remember doing that. So Mary was not a huge part of our lives, and part of that was I had a lot of Protestant friends, and even a Protestant girlfriend too, right? And so for me, it always seemed like Mary was more of a barrier of people coming to understand the Catholic faith than it was a bridge to God. And I'll admit, it wasn't until I became a seminarian that I really was challenged in this. There's this term called co-redemptrix that there's a recent document from the Vatican kind of instructing us to phase out from using that term. And part of that, I think the reason is just because it can be confusing, as if somehow, Jesus wasn't the only one that saved the world. Well, no, Jesus does it, but Mary's yes allowed that to happen. And that yes is what I want to talk about today, because for me as a seminarian, one of the biggest challenges was really discerning, okay, what is God's will versus my will? We always have the desire to be praised or to experience joy or not just joy, but pleasure, right? Or I want to be liked. I want to have a, whatever it is, X, Y, Z, versus what is God's will for me? What is going to bring me to the fullness of life, truly, to bring me fulfillment? But what's actually going to be the best for God's kingdom? What's going to be best for the salvation of the world? And that was a struggle. And what really helped me out, one of the things that helped me out, was really reflecting on Mary's yes. That moment when the angel Gabriel comes at the Annunciation and says that you're going to be the mother of the Messiah and you're going to name him Jesus. And even though Mary doesn't understand how that's possible, that her, a little, nobody from Nowheresville, is going to become the mother of the Messiah, how's that going to happen? She says, "May it be done unto me according to thy word. I am the handmaid of the Lord. Let it be done according to your word." I am the handmaid. She recognized that God was God and that she was imperfect. But because she was receptive to that message and to the instructions of God's will, she ended up, and it says, then she made haste to the country of Judah. She sought God's will, and she became the mother of Jesus and our greatest example of virtue. And so for me, it was a huge reminder that yes, I'm called to follow that yes. I'm called to say yes to God, to truly discern and open myself, to really detach from all my other things that maybe pull us in different directions, whether it's desire for praise or fear of failure, a fear of looking silly, or whatever it is. What if I'm not good enough? To say, no, God's going to take care of that, just as he took care of Mary. Mary's also the exemplar of all virtues, but especially humility and patience. Now, if you've been to confession with me and you've confessed things like impatience or pride or other things, or even lust, right? You've probably received the penance of a decade of the Rosary or some number of Hail Marys. And the reason for that is because Mary exemplifies those virtues so well. Someone who is so pure, who had perfect receptivity to God's will, was humble in that regard, knew who she was and who God was, and patient, willing to bear with the fact that it wasn't her timeline. And I think for me, and this is true what I've found, is meditating on Mary and her images, whether it's the Annunciation, thinking about that, about her yes, or about this Pietà, the moment where she had to hold her pierced son, this thing that was totally out of her control, that caused her such great grief. Maybe you've experienced things like that. Your family members making a choice that caused great grief, and you have to just sit with that because you can't change them. Mary's a great example for that. Whatever that is, meditating and allowing Mary's example to influence our heart can be a bridge for us to help us cope with our real lived experiences of the faith, and ultimately be a bridge to Christ. Now, if you want to learn more about Mary, many of you have your Magnificats or your daily Roman missals. It all comes from this big boy, the big boy Roman missal that the priest uses to celebrate the Mass. And I just want to highlight two little things. Actually, just one. And that's that there's all kinds of great prayers in here that the priest says during Mass, and we can learn a lot about our different saints, and especially about Mary from these prayers. For example, August 15th, which this year is actually on a Saturday, so it's not a day of obligation, but often it is. It's the Assumption, the day that Mary was assumed into heaven. And so it says this in the preface: For today, the Virgin Mother of God was assumed into heaven as the beginning and image of your church's coming to perfection and a sign of sure hope and comfort to your pilgrim people. Interesting. So it says that when Mary was assumed into heaven, body and soul, having been saved by God's grace, uh, prevented by preeminent grace, but from sinning in the first place, she assumes body and soul into heaven. And in the Eastern churches, they call this the Dormition. She is assumed into heaven, and it says here, it's the beginning and image of the church's coming to perfection. So just in the way that Mary was assumed into heaven, the church as well, at the final judgment or after the final judgment, will be assumed fully into heaven. That we as the church, of course, if we die before that second coming happens, we die for a time, right? But we believe that we'll share in that same divine life that the Trinity gives us, that Mary is already experiencing in heaven. That we get to be wrapped up in that divine life. Those of us who are grafted on to Jesus. That's incredible. That's our image. And that ought to give us hope, as it says, as a sign of hope and comfort to your pilgrim people. So as you live your faith, I encourage you to reflect today or this month. What is your Marian devotion? And for me, it's just I have a little decade rosary bracelet. So at least I know I've prayed the decade per day. What's your Marian devotion? Do you spend much time with Mary? And maybe this month, take a chance to do that. And may that lead you closer to her son, Jesus. Well, this has been Fridays with Father. I pray you have a beautiful May and happy Mother's Day to all the mothers out there. And I hope to see you soon. God bless.